bad guys. So as you can see, the Falcon is back in the stable, and not for reasons that we wanted or expected, but sometimes we have setbacks, and setbacks can be looked at as one of two ways: either a setback and preventing us from moving forward, or it's an opportunity to correct the shortcomings of this chassis and make it better. Now, the car where we were getting ready to finish up the build, we were plumbing the fuel system, gonna do all the electrical to it, and kind of the last 10% of the swap. In short, during that inspection, we went over the subframe with a fine-tooth comb, and we found some weak shortcomings in the chassis, things that certainly need to be corrected in the front end. One was the whole shock tower and subframe that's connecting the upper and lower control arm. That is a notorious weak area in these cars. So looking underneath, let's see if I can get you guys a shot. Looking underneath here, that area where you have the lower control arm, especially, I got the car jacked up from the passenger side, but on the driver's side, it was significantly weak. The area where there's adjustments between the lower control arm where that Zerk fitting is, it was actually thin enough to where if you took a pry bar, you could start moving some of this stamped steel, stamped aluminum. So you can see where the lower control arm was boxed into the subframe. I don't know if you guys can get reference of that. There's the tying in, but then you also have the subframe being cut to allow for the tubs and the wider tire. Unfortunately, when you remove that material, you can jeopardize the integrity of the rear subframe at that point. Upper control arm side going into the unibody, just aft of the floor pan. I see that starting to, the welds are starting to tear from the sheet metal of the car. And that's pretty thin. I mean, look, some of this stuff is stamped steel and stamped aluminum. You can see that there. Let me move it with my finger. So yeah, I think this is a better view, but you can see where this subframe was notched. The subframe goes into the unibody, and it was notched for the clearance of tires. And that's the problem with these unibody cars. You really gotta tie them up. They're not easy to do. See, some kind of adhesive was used, but the welds could have been better there. Especially that one there. You can see that one there. Hope you guys can see that. You can start moving some of this stuff, and you know, with the goal of what I want to be able to do with this car, it's just not going to be able to happen. You know, this car is going to make, you know, you guys, for those of you who follow the channel and saw the dyno video and the process of the 430 Windsor being built by CSM Racing Engines, the part where we finally got the motor in the car was all dandy. But as you guys know, this is a motor that made over 700 horsepower in the process of swapping. But then we found that there was weak points in the front suspension and the rear suspension, particularly with the subframe and the unibody, and how it integrated into the unibody and then the rear subframe, and how that back half relates to the unibody. If I'm gonna do this right and do it safely, I gotta address that stuff. So we decided we're gonna cut out all this shock tower stuff. And I think it's for a good reason. Although, you know, there are cars that do well with shock towers, I think we're well beyond the point of trying to make this stuff work. And the Chris Austin coilover conversion kit, upper and lower control arms, you know, they're the whole front end. But the stuff is only gonna, any kind of suspension you put on a car is only gonna be as strong as the links you attach it to. And so you can attach, you know, tubular steel components to stamped steel or stamped aluminum, And your weakest link is gonna be the weakest link. There's no way around that. I really believe going forth, this is the longer process. It's the long way, but it's the right way. And you know, in life, there are no shortcuts to doing something the right way. It's normally the long way, and it's normally the most hardest, the most time consuming, and that's just the way it is. I don't wanna get expectations up for the channel that we're gonna have this done in 3-4 months, because now I have to regroup and consider what are the options for this platform. It's mostly a derivative of Mustang stuff, especially for the 3rd gen Falcons, the forgotten Falcons. There's really nothing made for this car. The stuff that I've had on here has been adapted from a Cougar or a Mustang. The G-Link in the back end, that rear end, that was all adapted from the Chris Austin G-Link system, which was a derivative of what they had on the Cougar. And so it had to be fabricated as well. But you know, there was just some shortcomings with that stuff, and I don't want to take any chances. You know, in all honesty, I want this car to be as bad as it can be. And you know, the baddest car it can be, it starts from the ground up, and it's gonna be as solid as this foundation. This motor makes well over 700 horsepower, and we're running it through a 6-speed Tremec Magnum transmission. So you can imagine the speeds this vehicle will be reaching. So I've already had a close call in this car, tires that were cold, and fortunately it was just a close call. But I understand and realize the importance of having a car that's safe and sound. So what that means is I'm going to have to look at either a front clip, a new front clip, and a rear clip. Right now, if I'm gonna do a front or rear clip, I'm not even gonna mess around with anything but Detroit Speed. Just gonna be honest, that's probably the #1 candidate for getting these cars on a level that's up to a modern car in terms of handling and confidence and safety, and how the vehicle dynamics on the road. In terms of vehicle dynamics, handling, comfort, and just confidence in knowing the car's gonna stop, it's gonna turn, it's not gonna bounce all over when the road's upset. That's one of the things I wanna make sure is ironed out. So that's the reason for pick Detroit Speed's products if we're gonna go that direction in terms of a front and rear clip. Now we know Detroit Speed has the Alumaframe, which is a whole front clip. You tie that thing into the unibody. That would be the front end that would be preferred for the car. Same thing for the rear end. They have the Quadrolink that you would tie in, and it's got a pan hard bar, and it pretty much locates and controls the rear end, yaw axis, roll axis, and various different axes. It really controls the way the rear end is going to move in the car. The other thing is when you tie front and rear clips in the car, it's one thing, but you still have to address the unibody, which is the middle section of the car. But it's the unibody, and if you're not tying in that whole system in a way where the integrity of it is going to last jacking operations, maintenance service on a lift, all kind of dynamics that a vehicle will see, then you're really looking at having to, you know, potentially put yourself and others in danger on the road, or you're gonna have some type of failure. If I do a front and rear clip, it's gonna be a Detroit Speed front Alumaframe system with their Quadrolink for out back, if we decide to do a front and rear clip. But in all honesty, I believe that's the second best option, humble opinion. I believe the best option is a full chassis underneath the car. When I'm looking on the market of what chassis are available, I don't see anything more clear to me than what the Roadster shop has. And I think their spec chassis is the best option. The reason why I think their spec chassis is the best option is because just from an integral point of view, when you're looking at the structure of the thing and you compare it to some of the other chassis on the market, I can just tell there's no way that those chassis are gonna hold up to the torsional loads of a Roadster shop chassis. That's just, you looking at it, you can tell that thing's braced and it's made in a way that these other chassis were, when they were made, they were just made as a chassis. They weren't really considering, hey, low profile, simplicity of install. I think Roadster shop has really kind of they've moved the envelope to the next level in terms of having chassis that can literally go underneath your car. Now that is in no way saying it's going to be it would be an easy swap, but it is saying that I understand their approach when it comes to making a vehicle have modern dynamics, because at that point you're taking the unibody out of the equation. Then when you look at their spec chassis, it also has a lot of different options, gear ratios, how many splines you want in the axle, brake options. The cool thing about that chassis is it has 8 total mounting locations where it literally bolts to your existing subframe and unibody, which now your car is now taken off. The loads are taken off the unibody and the subframe, and it's now riding on a full frame chassis. They all can also consider their suspension geometry, which is on point. The exhaust, the subframe, the cross member for transmission locations. You can pretty much spec out any transmission that's on the market, whether it's any manual or any automatic, Ford, Chevy, GM, Chrysler, all the above, and literally will bolt in, you know. To me, that's a strong lead as to where I would go in terms of what's gonna go underneath this car. In terms of time, you know, the lead time on Detroit Speed, their lead time is 6 to 8 weeks. So we're mid-March, that automatically puts us mid-late May to when the order is made to the time you get the stuff in possession. So right off the bat, you know, that's just 6 to 8 weeks from the time you make the order. Whereas for the Roadster shop, their stuff is 24, 26 weeks from the date of purchase. So that's roughly six months. You got 52 weeks in a year, 26 is half of 52, that's 6 months. From the time you make the purchase to the time the chassis shows up. Why do I say this? Because, like I said, this is no longer a project that's gonna be 2-3 months. We're looking at 2, 3, and maybe 6 months before parts even get here, and that's when I decide to make a decision. So you guys comment, which way would you go? Would you go 2 subframes? We know how good Detroit Speed is. We've seen their builds, good understanding of chassis, suspension, components like that, handling dynamics, no question there. But I also have to say the same thing for the Roadster shop. The only drawback I can think of to having a full frame car underneath this thing is the weight. This isn't really an all-out drag car. This is more of a street car with some, you know, components that are race-like. It is not a drag car. It's not a full-on road race car. So you have the weight penalty, which is probably the only drawback. But there's just so much pros. And drop a link in the description to the spec chassis from the Roadster shop. I want you guys to comment. What would you guys do? Would you do the Detroit Speed hardware or the Roadster shop chassis with the suspension already integrated into it? Drop that comment, let me know. For you guys who have been following my channel, I really appreciate it. That's where we are. This delay wasn't expected. You know, there was part of me that kind of wanted to do some upgrades and knock out these shock towers to begin with, because for one, in the future, I could always go with any given motor I wanted to, whether it would have been an LS, big or small block Ford. Not likely to ever put a Coyote in this thing. I'm just not a twin overhead valve guy. I'm a pushrod, big and small block Ford and Chevy guy. For those of you, if you ever had any questions you wanted to know, I'm a 460, a Cleveland, a Windsor, big block Chevy guy, and a symmetrical port small block Chevy guy, and an LS guy. I am not a modular motor guy by any stretch of the imagination. So let's just clear the air with that. Not that I have anything against 2 and 4 valve and 3 valve mod motors. It is just not my flavor. I think there are some positives with this. Eliminating the shock towers, having all that suspension geometry down low, and having either a front and rear clip or straight out full chassis integrated into the car. To be all honest with you, the full chassis to me sounds like the best option, because now you're taking you're taking 60-year-old materials out of the equation, and you're having a engineered chassis support the car with significant suspension geometry integrated into it. So I'm going to drop a link to the Detroit Speed hardware in the video, and I'm also dropped a link for the Roadster shop hardware. And you guys who are kind of thinking about that, go in there and take a look and tell me what you think between the 2 options. Honestly, I'm leaning towards the Roadster shop spec chassis. They also have a fast track chassis. I just don't see the need for me to go there. If this was a car that was all out race, road race, or whatever the case may be, I could see myself going there. But for what I'm looking to do, the spec chassis should be more than enough. Reached out to Detroit Speed and the Roadster shop. And I talked to the roadster shop and I asked them about a 3rd gen Falcon. The 69 that I picked up Humboldt County, post that link here in the description as well. For those of you who follow the channel, go back to that video and reference it. But we picked up a 69, which was also a 3rd gen. I also talked to the roadster shop about scanning that car because they have the software and hardware to scan a body and then derive a chassis from that. So if you can actually send a body there, a chassis there, and then they can record it and figure out how to produce a chassis in the future. Now, obviously, I don't think the 3rd gens are even a scratch on the surface to even make a blip of warranting making a chassis, but they can make one custom for your body. You'd have to send it in. They have the machine and software to scan it and duplicate that. So that is an advantage. I thought about doing it, but it's just not in my interest right now to do so. But I think, you know, for some of you guys who have 3rd gen Falcons or Falcons in general, maybe there's someone out there with a full chassis. If you're out there with a Falcon with a full chassis underneath it, please drop that comment, let me know. Or if you're just out there with a Falcon and you're into race, you autocross. I know there's a few guys out there push their cars. I know there's a guy on Instagram at 64 Black Falcon. He has a bad 2nd gen Falcon, probably the baddest Falcon I've seen in the States, honestly. And he autocrosses that thing. I think he's out of Santa Barbara, down in SoCal. But he's pushing that car to the limits. I've seen his car in some other videos. It was 315 Squared, which is another YouTube channel geared around autocross and road racing. That's a bad Falcon. I know there's Bam Bam Jones who drag races. I think he's running, 850s, 840s with his 3rd gen. I think it's a 68 Falcon. He just got back on the road. I think it's got the AJE front clip in it and he's getting after it. And there's a few other guys who are out there like literally, you know, all out racing or committing their Falcons to competition. So if guys like you who have experience, if you see this, drop a comment, let me know what you think. But as of right now, we're getting rid of these shock towers. We're doing either a front and rear clip or we're doing a full frame. That's just where this is. So I appreciate you guys for watching. I want you guys to stay tuned, hit that thumbs up button. For those of you who haven't subscribe, log into YouTube, subscribe to the channel. I will keep you guys updated on what we decide to do. We're growing. We want to continue to get the 3rd gen Falcons out there. The goal is to ultimately get more parts made for this car. If anybody knows someone who has the ability to recreate or generate parts, whether it's pot metal, tin metal, such as like trim, moldings, let me know, because I'd be interested. We got a 69 to use as an R&D vehicle, so let me know. Alrighty, we'll see you soon. Thanks for watching.